Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Praveen and you are watching Techie Praveen. So in this video, we're going to talk about what are the different type of authentication in restassured. So let's get started. So first one is what is authentication and what is authorization? This is a very important interview question. Yes, what is the difference between authentication and authorization? So let's talk about the definition first so that you can easily answer this question in your interviews. Authentication is a process of verifying the identity of a user or a system. It answers the question, who are you? How it is done? Authentication typically involves checking credentials such as username and password, the most common form of authentication, biometrics, fingerprint, face recognition, etc. Tokens, OAuth tokens, JWT token, JWT, JSON web tokens, or API keys. Certificates, digital certifications used for system or application authentication. Multi-factor authentication (MFA) requires more than one method to authenticate. Example: a password, a code sent to your phone. So basically, authentication is a process where you exactly identify whether a user is an authentic user or not. Like the way if you're talking about a common example, your mobile phone. So if you have put your face recognition, then if you are using your phone will be opened by only by your face. If you put fingerprint is as an authentication, so it will always taking your fingerprint as a token of authentication. And if it provides the correct token, then your mobile gets open. Perfect. So authentication is the process to identify a user, that user is correct or not, that exact user is there or not. So there will be multiple ways that we can authenticate. Like common one is username password. Like if you seeing in multiple website, there will be login by using your username and password. Then we have biometrics. Then we have tokens, and then we have multiple certificates and multi-factor authentication. Like if you're talking about, if you're using GitHub, then there will be a multi-factor authentication, or you can say two-factor authentication. Right now Gmail also enabled a multi-factor authentication. So let's talk about the authorization. So authorization is the process of determining what actions or resources an authenticated user or system can access. It answers the question, what can you do? How it is done? Authorization is usually controlled via roles, permission, or access control like a list ACLS. Roles defines a set of permissions for user. Example, an admin or regular user are guest. Permission specific actions a user can perform, such as read, write, delete, etc. And access control rules that define what users or system can access specific resources. So after once the user is authenticate, once the authentication is done, then comes with the authorization, that what type of user you are and what are the things that you are able to do, right? So if you are authorized like an admin, then you have an admin right, you can do whatever you want. If you have a read access only, then you would only be able to read something. If you have a write access, then you will only be able to write the things. So like these type of access, that what type of access you are actually going to provide, is comes under authorization. So authentication means identify a user. Authorization means giving authority to a user to perform certain task. Okay. Now, how authentication is done? So basically, how exactly authentication is being done? So there will be two different type of things while doing the authentication. First one is primitive, and second one is non-primitive authentication. So let's talk about the definition first, and then I'm going to describe you. So primitive authentication means that a client sends authentication credential such as username and password immediately with the request, without waiting for the server to challenge the request with a 401 unauthorized status. This is typically used when the server is known to require authentication and the client doesn't want to wait for the server to reject the request before sending the credentials. In HTTP terms, the client sends the credential in the initial request as opposed to responding to a challenge. And non-primitive authentication works differently. With non-primitive authentication, the client does not send any authentication credential in the initial request. Instead, the client waits for a 401 unauthorized status from the server, which prompt the server to send a challenge. Once the server responds with a 401 unauthorized status, the client then sends the credential in the next request in response to a challenge. Example, basic authentication, digest authentication, etc. This is a default behavior for many HTTP clients, including REST assured unless explicitly configured for primitive authentication. So there will be two type of authentication. One is primitive and another one is non-primitive. Non-primitive is basically primitive is basically whenever you are just trying to whenever you are requesting something, you are actually passing your all credential with that request only. It becomes primitive. And non-primitive means non-primitive basically you are actually requesting a things, and when the server denied with 401 means unauthorized, then you are exactly sending all your authentication like bear token username and password. So the difference between primitive and non-primitive is in primitive you are actually directly sending the your all credential with your first request, and in non-primitive authentication you are exactly sending your request first, and when you are getting the response from a server like 401, then again in the second request you are exactly passing your credential. So how to exactly use these things? So basically in all HTTP requests or including rest assured, non-primitive is the default behavior. Okay, so whenever you're trying to send something with the credential like username, you are trying to authenticate something and you are passing your request with username password, you have to send like a preventive authentication. So by default authentication is non-primitive authentication, and when you are trying to send it you have to use primitive authentication. Okay, now what are different type of authentication we are exactly using? So first one is basic authentication. Basic authentication is one of the simplest form of authentication. It involves sending the username and password in the HTTP request header as a base64 encoding string. So in basic authentication, you are exactly passing your username and password. Second one is digest authentication. Digest authentication is more secure than basic authentication. It requires the server to hash the credential using a challenge response mechanism. So in digest authentication, basically you are sending just two requests when like it's a non-primitive basically. So you are actually sending a data in your first request, and whenever you are getting 401 unauthorized response, then you are again sending the your all credentials. Okay. Third one is Auth 1.0 credential. Auth 1.0 commonly used for third-party integration like Twitter and other services. Rest Assured has support for Auth 1.0 authentication using consumer key, consumer secret, access token, and token secret. So Auth 1.0, so whenever you are trying to log in on some pages nowadays, or you are trying to access some website, now you have seen that there will be multiple options, like you can log into a particular website by using Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or your Gmail ID. So you don't need to enter your all username and password there. You just click on the Twitter or Instagram ID, your social media ID, and it will get authenticate, and you will get the access. So for basically what exactly it was what happened in the background is that it provides the consumer key, consumer secret, or access token by using their social media account to that website, and it will get authenticated. What comes with Auth 2.0 authentication? Auth 2.0 is widely used for secure authorization, especially with APIs that involves third-party integrations. Rest Assured supports Auth 2.0 typically by obtaining a token through an authorized server and passing in the header for API request. So, like Auth 1.0, Auth 2.0 is also used for third-party integration. Typically, basically in 2.0, you are actually using a token to authorize a user, and you are actually passing these things in a header of API request. I'm going to create one separate video for Auth 1.0 versus 2.0, so you don't need to worry about, because this is also a very important interview question, that what is the difference between Auth 1.0 and Auth 2.0. Let's come up with the fifth part. Primitive authentication is same. So basically in primitive, you are exactly passing your all credentials within the same request. Okay, on any non-primitive, you are exactly sending two requests. One request you are sending to the server, and you will get 401 unauthorized authenticate 401 as a request code. And then when it comes to 401, then again you are sending your all credential with the non-primitive. So in primitive, basically there will be only one request where you are passing your all credential with the same request, and in non-primitive you are actually sending two requests. One in one first request you are getting 401 from the server, and in second one you are actually sending your all credential. Next one is custom header authentication, that is bearer token. In some cases, API requires custom authentication headers such as a bearer token. You can manually add these headers in your request. So nowadays, bearer token is a very important authentication. So whenever there will be two different APIs, so whenever you are trying to log in it, you will get one bearer token. And when you want to use other APIs, you have to pass that bearer token associated with only one user. So it is a customized header you are exactly passing to access different APIs. Okay, so there will be a different token for every single user. Seven one is API key authentication. API key authentication is another common form of authentication. You provide the API key as a party of the query parameter of the header. So in API key, you are exactly passing one API key in your header, and then you are only accessing the your API. So in bearer token in the point 6 and 7, one in 6 point you are passing your bearer token, and 7 one is your API key. Now let's talk about and conclude the video. So conclusion is basic authentication and digest authentication are suitable for legacy system or simple applications where security is less often a concern. So basic authentication, like basically you're just passing your username and password so basically it's a kind of a less security or concern whenever don't need a high secure system. So you're exactly using basic authentication. Auth 1.0 and Auth 2.0 are widely used for more secure, scalable system and integration because of third-party integration. So you require high security things to pass only the required data. And third one is custom header authentication and API key. Methods are often used for APIs that provide simple token-based security. In custom header, you are passing your bearer token and API key. Basically, both are customized information that we're exactly passing as a token-based security system. Okay. So we're going to see the practical implementation in the next video. So this is only for this video. I hope you like the video and you like my teaching style. This is very important video if you're talking about the interview perspective. So because authentication is the most important thing that was asked in a many interviews, because this is the most important thing, that how exactly you are dealing with the security things in API integration. So if you like my video, please do subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. And if you have any doubt, do let me know in the comment section. I will be more than happy to help you in that case. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.